Peace, everybody. What's good? My name is Willie Green, producer and engineer, live and direct from Brooklyn, New York. And we just got the brand new drop from Plugin Alliance, the Kirchhoff-EQ. And this thing is everything. And when I say everything, I mean this plugin has like everything you can need from an EQ all in one spot. We got a great record from my good buddy Duncecap today. So let's dive in and see how you use Kirchhoff-EQ on a hip hop mix. Let's go.
Fast. A couple gin and tonics at a rate I could have paused a bit. In 2 decades I vomited 2 times. My stomach's strong, I honor it. Potentially strong cause I'm responsible. Drinking, watering, self-sabotaging, sommelier.
Alright, so straightforward. We got a bit of a atmospheric type sample. We've got some drums doing some straightforward stuff. And then we've got this bass. We've got like a low sub bass and then a bass guitar doing some stuff on top. So let's see how we approach this with the Kirchhoff. Let's start with the sample. So what I want to do with this sample is I want it to be nice and full, but also make sure to leave space for Duncecap's rapping. Anytime there's a vocal in your record, that vocal is the most important thing in your record. So even though the sample takes up the bulk of the beat, I want to make some space in that sample so the vocal can lay right where it needs to. So let's start off down here around 250 hertz. That's kind of the mud zone. That's where things start to build up. And when someone says their mix sounds muddy, it's generally in that frequency range that they're talking about. So I want to remove some of the sample here and bringing it down a good bit, maybe 5 dB or so, 4.5, 5 dB. I want to get it out of the way. And so I'm notching this down here, but also I want to make sure the sample stays full and I want the sides to be nice and thick. So I've switched this band here out of stereo mode, full side left-right mode, and I'm just reducing the mids. That way my sides stay nice and full, but I'm making that space for the vocal. Let's take a listen.
Fast. A couple gin and tonics at a rate I could have paused a bit. In 2 decades I vomited 2 times. My stomach's strong, I honor it. Potentially strong cause I'm responsible. Drinking, watering, self-sabotaging, sommelier, deconstructive spectator. Nothing.
Right, it doesn't fundamentally change the beat, but I'm making space for that vocal. When I bypass it, you see it starts to crowd there a little bit. We start to cover up the bottom end of Dunce's voice. I'm not a huge fan of the super high-passed vocal. I like a nice, full, big vocal, and so I don't want to take that away from Dunce, but it's got to give somewhere. So in this case, we're going to give it out of the sample. But I was missing a little bit of kind of brightness and forwardness on the sides. I want the sides to really feel full and to really get a full resolution on the sides. So in addition to this dip here in the mids and the sides, I'm boosting at about 4.5K. But I don't want to boost that in the center because that's where a lot of the intelligibility and the clarity in Dunce's voice is. So I'm able to use the Kirchhoff to maximize my stereo image and get it brighter on the sides while leaving that space that we need for Dunce to stay right where he needs to be in the center. And if you notice on my mid band here, on this mid line, I did my dip, but I've got a little bit of a roll off here on the top. Well, this is what I mean by Kirchhoff has everything. Each EQ band can be from any number of different EQs, right? I've got this set on the Brit N Bell, so that's emulating a Neve type EQ, but I've got all of these options, all these standard Kirchhoff, great sounding EQ curves, and these are going to be surgical for you. These are going to be neutral sounding and just take out or add in whatever you need, but keep things pretty neutral. But if I want to add some flavor to it, if I want to put a little spice on it, we've got a few other options here. And it's rolling off this top end because it's emulating the whole circuit of that EQ. So a Neve style EQ is going to have a little bit of a softer top. It's going to roll off that top a little bit. And that just sounded right to me for the sample. I want the clarity and I want those sides brighter in the high mids, but I don't need a lot of up above 20K for this sample. It's a lo-fi type of sample. So I don't mind the little roll off. And then up here in pink, this 2X, that's the oversampling. So I'm getting the clarity and the precision from the EQ, but I don't need that top end. So we're letting that just ease right off in the center with our mid band here. Let's take a quick listen again to this first verse and hear what the bass is doing here.
Fast. A couple gin and tonics at a rate I could have paused a bit.
So the bass guitar is almost counter melodic to what the sample is doing. It's a little bit ad-lib, it's a little bit improvised, and it's just kind of nice and sitting back there, and I'm happy with the sound of it. But this being a rap record, I want to make sure that my kick is knocking and punching through the way that we know we need it. And so I want to compensate for that in the bass. Now, I don't want to lose the low end of my bass. I just want it to get out of the way a little bit when the kick decides that it's ready to hit. So I've activated the sidechain feature of the Kirchhoff, and I'm sending my kick drum to it. And again, the Kirchhoff has everything, so this is also a dynamic EQ, meaning that not in sidechain mode, if a band goes above a certain threshold, Kirchhoff can reduce those frequencies. Or if it's below a threshold, it can raise them up so you can even out your sound. Or if you use the sidechain, we can duck certain frequencies when the sidechain input triggers it. So what I'm doing here is everything below 100 hertz is going to duck when the kick drum is sent into the sidechain. So when the kick hits, the sub-frequencies duck out of the way, and then when the kick lets off, the bass comes back naturally. Let's check that out.
Fast. A couple gin and tonics at a rate I could have paused a bit. In 2 decades I vomited 2 times. My stomach's strong, I honor it.
So in whatever band you want to utilize this on, you right-click and you enable dynamics. And now that band is going to respond to that threshold. So when the kick hits, you're going to see it duck, and I'm going to use the release time to naturally bring the bass back in. We don't want it to be super herky-jerky, but we want it to smoothly come back in. So we want a quick attack time, so it gets right out of the way the second that transient hits, and we want it to come back in very naturally.
Fast. A couple gin and tonics at a rate I could have paused.
We can adjust our threshold right here, so we get it right where we need it.
Potentially strong because I'm responsible.
And you know, I may think, oh, well, it's ducking too much. All right, well, let's change our range. Let's reduce the range.
Repop your cherry ever. It'll be a long.
We can just blend that into taste. But anytime maybe a vocal is coming in and maybe the sample might be building up there. So we can use the vocal to trigger that band to duck when the vocal comes in. And when the vocal is not in, the sample can return to its full fidelity, right? Mixing is a puzzle. Everything has to fit together. So everything can't be loud all at the same time. If not, everything's just screaming at you. We want to let things out of each other's way and have a lot of nice space for everything to glue together. And finally, let's take a quick look at the drums for a second. The drums in this record are pretty straightforward, but what that means is there's nowhere to hide on the sound. The drums have to really knock just the way that they are. We need to bring that out. So let's take a look at the kick. I don't want to do a lot to it. I don't need to do a lot. I want to roll off some of the top end. It has a nice punchy sound to it, but it was a little bit clicky. So I'm going to just use low pass filter. So we're just going to roll off the top. And then down here at about 400, 410, I'm just putting a little bit of a notch there. When you hear people talk about a boxy sound, that's kind of that frequency range, 400, 500 hertz. So if something is feeling boxy to you, you just want to do a little bit of a reduction there. Let's A-B this kick, see how we're sounding.
Fast. A couple gin and tonics at a rate I could have paused a bit. In 2 decades I vomited 2 times. My stomach's strong, I honor it. Potentially strong because I'm responsible. Drinking water and...
All right, so our low pass is just shaving off a little bit of that top. It was a little clicky, and that's wonderful for certain genres and what you might want in a metal record or something. But on this mellow kind of lo-fi hip-hop beat, we don't need all that top end on there. So we're just going to roll that off a little bit. And then just to tighten it a little bit and not get that box, we've got our little 400, 410 little dip there. Moving on to the snare, we did a little bit more work here, but let's see what's happening. We've got our high pass filter, just rolling off up to about 100 hertz. There's nothing that's going to be real useful in a snare drum at 100 hertz for me. So I want to clear that space out to leave room for what needs it. Our kick, our bass, and our synth bass that's also doing stuff down there. So we're going to roll that off. We're getting a little bit of these tubby frequencies out of the way here. You know, it's 350, almost 400. Again, that's that box. And then up here, it was just a little bit too aggressive in the mid-range, and I wanted to just duck that and just mellow it out a little bit. And on the top, we're just taking the edge off a little bit again. I don't want to completely remove it in the same way I did with the kick drum, but we're just taking a little bit of that edge off.
Fast. A couple gin and tonics at a rate I could have paused a bit. In 2 decades I vomited 2 times. My stomach's strong, I honor it. Potentially strong cause I'm responsible. Drinking water and self-sabotaging sommelier. Deconstructive spectator. Nothing can repop.
Right? It's subtle, but in mixing, it's a game of inches, and a little bit goes a long way. And that just set that snare drum right back in there in the drums where it needs to be. Without the EQ, it's just kind of poking out a little bit too much, and it doesn't fit the same vibe. It doesn't feel the same as the rest of the record. So there's a quick little breakdown of some things that you can use the Kirchhoff-EQ for in your hip hop mix, but really these things can translate to any kind of mix, making space for the low end, making space for the vocal, sitting things right where they need to be in the mix, and maximizing your stereo width. These are all things that are super easy to do with the Kirchhoff. A few button clicks here, a few tasteful choices there, and you're on your way to a wonderful mix. So shout out to Plugin Alliance, shout out to 3 Body Technology who designed Kirchhoff, and shout out to y'all for tuning in with me, your man Willie Green. Got a lot more coming from Plugin Alliance, so we'll check you next time. Peace.